OCO. My name is Robert Lewis. Welcome to Cherokee Days at the National Museum of the American Indian. Okay? I'm a storyteller. We're getting ready to start storytelling right now in the lower level. I grew up in a little bitty town in Salina, Oklahoma. I was the shyest person in my class. I wouldn't say a word to anybody. Storytelling evolved for me due to my family. I'm Cherokee, but I'm also Navajo and Apache. My dad grew up in Chinle, Arizona. My mom grew up in Kenwood, Oklahoma. They met at a bus stop in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So as I was growing up, I was one of three other boys. There's four of us. My mom always wanted girls in the family because girls amongst Cherokee society passed down the clan lineage, but girls are very important in Cherokee society. We treat our women with a great deal of respect. We take care of our women. And because of this, my mom always wanted girls in her family. She grew up with sisters and had like three brothers, but she had nothing but boys. First one was supposed to be named Phyllis. That turned out to be Philip. The next one was supposed to be named Marquita. That turned out to be John Mark. I was supposed to be named Roberta. Ta-da, here's Robert. Hey. Last one's supposed to be Paula. Paul shows up. So my mom gave up and told my dad, says, okay, we're going to have granddaughters. First child born is Matthew. Then comes Samson. Then comes John Joseph and James. And I have two boys, Suimosa and Kea Seal. Paul never had kids. And so my mom had to wait years before she finally got the great-granddaughters that started showing up. But she finally got some. She has 5 great-granddaughters, and my mom's happy. And those little girls are spoiled rotten. But Christy was also one of my nieces. She showed up at the tail end of all the other boys. Christy's the meanest tomboy you ever seen in your entire life because she grew up with nothing but boy cousins. So that's my background. Amongst Native people, we'll tell you a little about before we get started. My storytelling evolved from working at a museum. I worked at the Cherokee Heritage Center. When I worked out there, people from all over the world would come. They'd come learn about Cherokee history and Cherokee culture. But one day I was sitting out there and had a group of kids out there, and they weren't paying any attention at all to their teachers. They were restless, and they were bored. So I looked at all of them, and I knew some stories. So I said, do you want to hear a story? And they said, yeah. They sat down. I told a story. I finished it. I did not think anything about it. They went on with the rest of the tour in the museum, and I kept on working. Somebody came walking up to me later on. She says, I saw you telling stories. That was good. I said, yeah, thank you. I didn't know you could tell some stories. You know, how many do you know? I said, I know a couple. She shook my hand. She said, that's a good job. I said, thank you. Then I said, do I get a raise? No, you don't, but that's a good job because it's a museum. She walked off. Didn't think anything about it. But a couple of days go by. My boss comes up. He's actually here. His name's Perry Van Buskirk. He's sitting over there. He's taught me an awful lot. But he looked at me and says, here, look, there's a paper. And read it and talked about everything you see at the museum, but also said there's Robert Lewis, Storyteller. And he says, you started something. You better go find some more stories. So Perry's here. The reason I'm standing here, Perry went and got some more stories. So I started going. I started gathering more and more stories. I now have 100 inside my head. The ones I start with, I have no idea which one I'm going to tell you. I just start talking. Okay? But amongst Cherokees, we have a creature that's called Gistu. Everybody say Gistu. Gistu is rabbit. Rabbit causes trouble and mischief. Rabbit gets in trouble. Rabbit has to figure out some way to get out of it. So if anybody's ever seen a Bugs Bunny cartoon, guess what? That's Cherokee. That's all from Briar Rabbit, and that's all from Gistu, the trickster amongst the Cherokee Nation. So Bugs Bunny is actually Cherokee. We should get to claim him. And that Bugs Bunny character would always get in trouble. So one of the first stories I ever told when I was out there with these little kids was that one time, Gistu and Possum were looking for a wife. And they were looking for a wife because they were lonely. Now, Rabbit causes trouble. All the women in the village knew that Rabbit caused trouble. And so all the women in the village didn't want anything to do with him because he's the troublemaker. But Possum made medicine. Possum noticed that when people were hurt, Possum had a good heart. Possum would walk to him, find out what was wrong with him, and he would go out and go amongst all the plants and gather all the plants, and he would experiment and find out which one would help them. If they had a headache, he'd go and he'd get some plants for that. If they were feeling bad in their belly, he'd go and get plants for that to heal them. As time went on, he became a very well-known medicine possum. But one day, he and Rabbit were sitting beside the creek, and Possum admitted to Rabbit, there's something missing in our life. And Rabbit says, what's missing? We have the sun, we have the wind, we have the rain, moon, the stars, clovers, tiny bugs, butterflies. What else do we need? And Possum says, a wife. I'm tired of hugging dead leaves and crying myself to sleep at night because I have no wife. And Rabbit says, I've heard you cry. That is a pitiful sound. Let's go find a wife. So they go walking off into the woods. As they get out into the woods, they come across this village, and there's these women, and they're working on baskets. Cherokees have a unique way of weaving baskets, and when you get a chance to go around here and visit with all the other Cherokee artisans that are here, you'll see examples of basket weaving. These women were working on these baskets. And Possum and Rabbit come walking up to them, and they says, those are beautiful baskets. And the women say, thank you. And then Possum looks at him and says, you must have a strong husband help you so that you have time to work on your baskets. They're out there hunting, bringing you food. Most of the women said yes. But there was one woman that says, I don't have a husband yet. And that got both Possum and Rabbit excited. They both came out and says, okay, well, we're looking for a wife. Why don't you marry one of us? The woman looks at him and says, I'd like some food. Are you a good hunter? And they sat there and said, we're good hunters. Rabbit says, I'm pretty quick. I can track something down. Possum says, I'm kind of slow, but I'm good with my bow and arrow. And then the woman says, I also like dancing. Can you dance for me? And so they start to dance. And as they dance and wiggle around and finish dancing, the women all gather around that one woman. And they tell her all the things they know about Rabbit and Possum. And so the woman looks at him and says, I like you, Possum. I like your eyes. I like your smile. I like your thick, bushy tail. But from what I've heard from my other elders, they say you hang out with Rabbit too much, and Rabbit causes trouble. And I can't have that around my house, because even though I may marry you, I know eventually he's going to come by to visit, and that's just going to cause trouble. I'm sorry. I can't marry you. And Rabbit just looks at her and says, what about me? He says, you're a troublemaker. I don't want anything to do with you. And so they go walking off, and they leave that woman. As they're walking away, Possum's looking at Rabbit, and Possum says, I can't believe this. That's one woman. I could already be married right now. I would not have to hug dead leaves anymore. But because I hang out with you, I got nothing. And so Rabbit says, let's go to the next town. I'm sure there's some women there who haven't heard about us. Let's go there. So they go to the next town. When they come there, there's a group of women working around their huts. They're cooking dinner, and some of them are helping mend part of the hut. And as they're working on it, and the house is getting repaired, Rabbit goes walking up to him and says, hello, beautiful women. Are any of you available to get married today? And while they're sitting there looking at that Possum and that Rabbit, the women all point to these two girls. They say, they're not married yet. They're looking, though. And so Possum steps forward and says, well, guess what? We're looking for a good wife. If there's two of them, maybe I could have one, and Rabbit could have the other. And so the women all turn and they talk to the two girls. And the two girls come forward. And again, the same thing happens. We need good hunters, but we like dancing. And when Rabbit and Possum show off their dancing skills, the girls all do the same thing. We like you, Possum, but we talk to Mom and Grandma and our aunts, and they say you hang out with Rabbit too much. You've got to go look someplace else. Sorry. And so Possum and Rabbit leave again. And as they leave and make their way out through the woods, Possum's really grumbling now. Says, I can't believe this. That's 3 women. I could have 3 wives. I have nothing but you to look at. And Rabbit says, but I'm pretty. You should be proud to look at me. Possum says, I look at you, but I don't want to kiss you. So I need a wife. Rabbit says, I need one too. Let's go to the next town. And Possum says, all these people in this valley, they know us. They know us. They especially know you and your bad habits. And Rabbit thinks a little bit and says, guess what? I think there's another town. It's on the other side of the mountain. Let's crawl over there and go see it. It's a whole new town. They won't know anything about my bad habits. We'll have better luck there. Possum thinks about it and says, okay, I agree. Let's go there. And so they start to leave. Today they call it college. When they send that young boy to college, the girls there don't know anything about you because you're interesting all over again. And this is what Rabbit's gambling on. So he gets over the top of the mountain. And as they're coming down, they happen to hit some loose rocks. A few pebbles start to bump into bigger ones and bigger ones. Rabbit and Possum keep going down. They don't notice it until they hear this sound. When they look, and all these rocks start sliding down. Rabbit starts ducking, dodging, and running, and getting away. Possum runs like this. Ah! Squashed him flat. Rabbit went back up later and says, ooh, you don't look good. Your eyeball's over there by that tree. And Possum's voice comes up from that ground all flat and says, I need my eye. Go get my eye. So Rabbit gets the eye and gives it back to Possum. Possum puts it back in and goes, oh, I need my medicine. It's in my pouch. Dig it out for me. So Rabbit pulls out the medicine, holds it up, and then Rabbit says, I don't know how to make medicine. How do you make medicine? I've never done this before. And so Possum says, I'll tell you what to do. You chop it. So Rabbit chops it. You pound it. Rabbit pounds it. You stir it. You mix it. You boil it. Saute, saute. Let me drink it. Possum starts to feel better, sets up, the medicine flows through. He gets back up, kinks out of his back, and starts to go, oh, I feel better. Rabbit looks at him and says, your tail's still crooked. It's leaning to one side. I think the medicine's still working on you. I'll run ahead. I'll get us some wives. You catch up. It's that town right over there. We'll both have wives. And so Possum says, that's a good plan. I'll catch up with you. So Possum starts walking down the road like this. And Rabbit takes off. Rabbit goes to the next town. The people see Rabbit coming. And they say, Rabbit's the messenger. He must have something important to say. He's come all the way over the mountain. And so the chief gathers up with Rabbit and says, what is it? And Rabbit says, I have a very important message. It comes from Bear. And so the chief and all the people are sitting in the council house says, what does Bear want? And Rabbit says, Bear is afraid. There's not enough love in the world. Love makes you happy. When you're in love, your eyes sparkle. You smile more. You're kinder to everybody. There must be more love in the world. When you see the one you love, your heart beats really fast, and that's good for all that circulation that runs through your body. And so the chief says, well, what should we do about it? And Rabbit says, Bear thinks everybody should get married. And so the chief turns and tells everybody, get married. And so everybody got married. The wolves got married. The birds got married. The cat and the dog got married. That didn't last too long. And even Rabbit finds a wife. And while everybody's happy and everybody's getting married and everybody's smiling, Possum comes walking in. He sees everybody. He turns and he sees that rabbit sitting there by the ground holding that pretty girl's hand and kissing it and says, what are you doing? Where's mine? And Rabbit says, I'm sorry. I forgot all about you. This is Mrs. Bunny. And starts to smile at that possum. Possum looks at that rabbit again and says, I can't believe you did this. You have a wife. I have nothing. And Possum starts to cry. The woman turns and looks at Rabbit and says, what's your friend? Says, he's crying. It's bad when he cries. He usually cries when he's hugging dead leaves. And so the woman says, well, what can we do about it? She says, I have to keep my promise to him. I promised him a wife. And so she says, you must keep your promises. And then she gives him that eye that all women are blessed with, especially to me. Women have a look that you have this look where if you look at a man a certain way, boom, he knows he's in trouble, or he knows he better get up and do what he's supposed to do. Because if he doesn't, fire and brimstone going to come around the house. And so, Rabbit turns, looks at Possum, says, come on, let's go get a wife for you. And they leave. But as they're walking down to the next town, Possum's grumbling over and over this. I can't believe this. I can't believe you did this to me. You get a Mrs. Bunny. I got nothing but a pile of dead leaves. What kind of friend are you? You run off with the first pretty girl you see. On and on and on and on. Possum keeps going. Till finally Rabbit says, enough. I'll run ahead. I'll get you a wife. And then Possum says, she better be pretty. She'll be beautiful. And Rabbit starts to leave. And then Possum says, wait, you got to make this up to me even more. And Rabbit says, what now? Possum says, I want a party when I get there. Rabbit says, fine, and takes off running. Rabbit goes to the next town, comes up to that chief. That chief is already there in the council house with all his people. When he sees the rabbit, the chief says, we've already heard the message. It's passing around everywhere. Everyone must have love. So I'm gathering all my people inside the council house to see who needs to get married. Rabbit says, wait. Bear has a new message. And so the chief says, what is it? Bear's worried. There is too much love in the world. Everybody's in love. And when you're in love, you don't pay attention to anything else. You bump into trees. You trip over rocks. You fall into creeks. They forget what they're doing because they're so in love. All they can do is think about that other person. And so the chief says, well, what should we do about it? Bear's worried. We're going to get taken over. We're going to get conquered. So we must prepare for battle. Everybody must fight. And so the chief turns and looks at everybody inside the council and says, everybody prepare for battle. Everybody fight. And so they all started jumping on each other, growling, biting, snarling, clawing. Rabbit runs out of this. Possum's almost up to the council house and sees the rabbit and says, hey, where's my wife? Is she in there? Rabbit says, yes, she's in that big building. And inside you can hear this sound. And so Possum hears that and says, what's that noise? Rabbit says, that's your party. You run in there. You kiss your wife. You make her yours. And so Possum starts to walk in there and says, I can't see. It's so dark in there. What does she look like? Rabbit gives this description to Possum. Says she stands about so tall. You'll see her. She's standing right in the middle of the council house. You run in there, grab her, kiss her, make her yours. And so when Possum walked inside and looked inside, the only person standing in the middle of the council house was the chief, looking around. And Possum says, oh, she's tall. I like her tall. I'm going to run up and kiss her. And so Possum runs in there, puts his arms around the chief, and the chief goes, ah! Because he's got this possum trying to kiss his face. Everybody hears the chief scream, and everybody stops. They turn. They see that possum wrapped around that chief, and they all think the same thing. Hey, that possum's attacking our chief. So they all jumped on that possum. They drug him off the chief. They started punching his nose, blacking his eyes. He screamed and tried to crawl out. They grabbed that bushy tail, ripped all the hair off that bushy tail, and drug him back in. They punched, kicked, bit, clawed, and he says, I'm going to die. So Possum came up with a plan. He lay flat on the ground and grinned. And everybody backed up. And the chief recognized who it was and says, oh no, we killed the possum that makes all our medicine. Everybody must leave. So everybody ran out of the council house. And Possum, laying there, playing possum, waits for 1 whole hour, gets up, gets his medicine out of his pouch, starts to mix it, pound it, stir it, boil it, and drink it. Gulp, 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 gulp. And it almost fixed him. He came walking out of the council house and says, I will never be friends with Rabbit again. And this is why possums and rabbits don't hang out together. This is why possums look the way they do. They got a pink nose, dark eyes. If you look at that tail, there's no hair on that tail anymore. But possum is still trying to find Mrs. Possum. And you've seen this possum. He'll be out there late at night walking across that road going, where's she at? She's got to be out here somewhere. Oh, there's a pretty light. Maybe she's by that light. And somebody go, ooh, you ran over a possum. Don't worry. It's the medicine possum. Because he'll lay out there for a week. You drive by, ooh, look, ooh, the eyeballs way over there. Ooh. But then, one day you go down that road, guess what? He'll be gone. Because in the middle of the night, he got his medicine, fixed himself back up. He's still looking for love, but he keeps looking for love in all the wrong places. Wado. Now, let's see how much time I've got. Ooh, I got time for one more. A little one, short one. This is told to me by a man named Sequoia Guest. Sequoia is a storyteller. He comes back and forth in North Carolina. And Sequoia and I have actually done the possum, medicine possum, and rabbit story before, where he played one part as the rabbit and I played the possum. We kept going back and forth with our lines. But one day he was looking at me, he got us together and he says, let's have a storytelling session inside the old council house village. So we did. We're sitting there, we're telling stories. And he told me this story. It's something I hadn't heard. I just heard it not too long ago. So I want to share it with everybody here. He says, there's something that children do, and most kids do this, and some people, even adults, have a tendency to do this. Selfish. Mine belongs to me. And he says this story addresses that, which is what our stories did for the most part. They would explain why things are the way they are, why an animal looked the way it did, or why you need to behave and listen to your parents and your elders and your teachers, because they're trying to educate you. Our stories would, for the most part, be a guideline for how you would be sitting there and treat each other inside the village. Because you learn how to make your pottery, you learn how to make your baskets, you learn all your life skills, but going out there and dealing with people is something you also had to learn. And so this story reflects on that. He said at one time, this fox came out of the woods. The fox had been hunting. The fox was tired. And so the fox came over the top of the hill and came down by this creek, and the water's flowing. And so the fox thinks, I get to get a drink of water, and sits down and begins to drink. But as he takes his first drink, he hears a voice, that's my water. And he stops and looks around, but can't see anybody. So he starts to get another drink, and he hears that voice again, that's my water. And so he stops, and he says, I can't see you, but I'm thirsty. And I think the water, the creek, belongs to anybody who wants a drink. I think all the animals can drink here. The bear, the deer, turtle, I get to drink here too. So the fox starts to get another drink, and then hears the sound again, that's my water, that's my water, that's my water. And so he looks around, and finally he can hear where the sound's coming from. It's right beside this mud bank. And on this mud bank is a hole, a little tiny hole sitting there. And the voice is coming out of that hole. And so Fox walks closer to that hole and says, I really can't hear you that well. Could you come out and tell me what you're saying? And out from that hole, these little antennas come out, these two eyes come out, this little shell comes out, and these pinchers come out, and it's a little crawdad. You call him a crayfish. Crawdad comes out, looks at that fox, says, that's my water, that's my water, that's my water. And the fox looks at the crawdad and says, I'm sorry, I can't hear you that well. Could you come tell me a little closer? And so the crawdad comes out of the hole, walks up right to the fox, and says, that's my water, that's my water, that's my water, that's my water. And then the fox ate the crawdad. We tell the story to remind you, don't be selfish. Don't be stingy. you share. And when you share, guess what? You get back an awful lot more than what you gave. Which is why we come here and do programs for you. We're here to help share our culture with you. So you hope you walk away with just a little bit more for you to help you. Even if it's just a story or something you learn out here with all the pottery or the basket weaving, or talk with us. We're happy to be here. And I'm extremely thankful to be here, to be a storyteller. Wado, and thank you.